Ellen Stanton loves her Morgans, and when she talks about them, there's obvious affection for each and every one of them, and there have been many that have crossed her path. One of the things that I enjoyed most about meeting with Ellen, and this was also the case when talking with Dick, her husband, and Elaine, one of her daughters, was their honesty. When you listen to them, you can just imagine what it must have been like to ride Mo bareback, or urge Don to give a little more, or smile when Flair tried to unseat you. The Tanglewood story covers lots of ground. We get to visit with Morgan owners that have been active in New York State since 1952. It's a story of love and commitment, with Ellen and Dick being married and focusing on horses since 1951. And also a story of the three daughters and one son, all involved with the family Morgans for many years, and with Lori and Cindy now working horses as professionals. And as for Ellen and Dick, well, when I visited with them in January of 2006, they had over 60 horses in the barn and were on a break from teaching their Syracuse University equestrian program, something that they've done for over 24 years. It was a real treat to be a guest in their home and to reminisce with them about what it was like to be the caretakers of these wonderful Morgans. I hope you enjoy as much as I did what they have to share. Ellen writes, I had my first horse, Star, given to me by a friend who could no longer keep her, and I didn't dare tell my parents until I could show that I could support her, since those were early post-Depression days, and I knew my parents couldn't afford a horse. I had a lot of jobs. I babysat, worked in a tree nursery, provided pet care for people who were on vacation, cleaned houses, and then, after 2 months, I told them, and they allowed me to keep her. She was a 16-hand part thoroughbred. Dick grew up in Nedrow, working with horses at nearby riding stables from the time he was about 10 or 11, Bailey's stables in Crestmont, about a mile away. He did chores and took out trail rides and spent many hours a week on horseback. As a young man, after serving in the Air Force for 2 years, Dick was training saddlebreds, Tennessee walking horses, and hackneys for the undertaker Carl Ballweg at the Sunny Hill Farm in DeWitt. There was also a Morgan stallion there for training. Dick thinks he was registered as Allen's Indian Boy by Cornwallis and out of Betsy Ross. They called him Run Along. As Ellen tells the story, my blacksmith told me about this trainer over in DeWitt who had a beautiful strawberry roan and white walking horse stallion, Snuffy, and took me and a friend over to see him. Frankly, I was more interested with Snuffy, but Dick invited me over to watch him train the horses. I would ride Star from my home on the Jamesville-Manlius Road to Sunny Hill, about 6 miles along the road shoulders, and when it was time to go home, he would ride with me all the way back on his stallion Snuffy. We made this trip in all kinds of weather, a very interesting courtship. We were married in 1951. He was 22, I was 18. We bought the weanling stallion, Allen's Mohawk Chief, in the fall of 1952 for $150, the beginning of our Morgan ventures. Later, in the fall of 1959, Dick went to the Cornell Horseshoeing School, which was a year after we bought Tanglewood Farm.
My first Morgan was just a half Morgan. She was a black mare, we called her Shadow, and she was by Allen's Seneca Chief. I rode her I had her till she died. I had her for years. But then when Dick and I were first married, George Digert was breeding horses up in Pennellville. And we decided we'd like to buy a Morgan colt. So we went up there and, first married, and back in those days, money wasn't. So we looked at all his colts, and he had one really gorgeous colt, big and handsome, but then there was this other little colt alone in a stall because he'd been injured. He had a tree limb or something had gone into his side, and so his mother had been nursing 2 foals, and they didn't want to keep all 3 in, so this poor little kid was weaned early, and they only wanted $150 for him. And he had a lot of class about him, but this other colt was so. But Dick said, no, I like that little one better. And boy, the other colt grew into kind of a big, cloddy Morgan, nice horse, but and we named this colt Allen's Mohawk Chief. We brought him home. He cost $150, and the last $5 was in coins, I think. We just thought we were really proud of our little Morgan horse. And he gained weight, he looked pretty, and he went a long way. And he's the best family horse any family could ever have had, with 4 kids. And it was just, he was great. He was 32 and a half when he died. He was the first Morgan really in this area. So a lot of grade mares were coming into it all the time too. People were having fun with their half Morgans all around. I never worried about them. I could go bareback down the road on him. He just was honest as the day is long. He wasn't the kind of horse wanted you to cuddle his head and smooch with him. He loved to be groomed, he loved to work, and he loved to go. And that to me is Cornwallis. That's the Cornwallis line. They're cooperative and they love to go. They're a little hot. They can be a little bullheaded.
I remember him entirely. I was always so proud because I was like 8 years old and I could ride this Morgan stallion. He was so gentle and such a nice, he was probably one of the classiest Morgans I've ever met. He did, he just never did anything wrong. And he lived, God, he must have been 180,000 years old when he finally died. He was a really nice horse. I think that was the first one that I really remember my parents having right from the start. He was an old timer. I remember him very, very well. And he was so affectionate. He never was mouthy like a lot of stallions. Mm-hmm. And as little kids, we could ride him anywhere. He just was such a gentleman. He was a really, really nice horse.
His breeder was in New Hampshire, I think. And it all happened so strangely. I was grooming a horse one day, and I don't even know what horse. And this man came in the barn, and he was a cousin or brother or uncle of the man who bought our house down the road before we moved here. And he said, "I love Morgan horses." And I said, "Yeah." I mean, I had kid visitors all the time about Morgan horses. And he said, "I used to have one." And I said, "Oh yeah," and I was still grooming. And I said, "What was his name?" And he said Cornwallis. I could have died. I was so excited. I came out and talked to him, and he said he had him when he was just a teenager, and he'd saved and saved and saved. And I don't know if he went up there or just bought him, over the phone, or I think that was sort of the way he told me. And he said he arrived in a boxcar. And he had him till he was probably 4 or 5, and then he sold him, I think it was to the Allen farm in Baldwinsville, and then he went from there to Anahewa. But he was so beautiful, and had that look. To me, the presence is the word for it. Even in that picture with this kid on him, If she didn't buck and play or be sassy in a class, she'd win it.
Mohawk at the national.
Isn't that amazing? That there's the 2 of us on our 2 favorite horses at the same stride at the National Morgan Horse
Mirror
Show.
picture.
Work with Fanny Allen for her. But she'd already had Belinda. And somehow we paid the difference, and we got a lot of horses on those kind of deals. And we bred her to Don Morrow, and she had this picture-perfect foal, Don Linda Morrow, we named her. And she did quite a bit of winning. She ended up Elaine's horse for a while. And we had her till she died, too. We had Belinda till she died, I'm sure, but I can't remember the circumstances of it. Mm-hmm. It was so cute when she had Don Linda. She was due, and the Morgan meeting was going on up near Albany. And so I went to the Morgan meeting, and Dick stayed home with the foal, and with the mare, because we didn't want to leave her. And when I came home, I raced out to meet the car when I drove And little Elaine was jumping up and down and up and down. She said, or no, it was Cindy. Up and down. She said, Mommy, Mommy, Belinda had a bee on with a baby foal in it. Then we started raising foals from her, but we were breeding her flare by then. She had this gorgeous, gorgeous foal, but he had a scrotal hernia. And so the vet said they should take care of it, and we took him to Cornell. And he was like 4 days old. And when I got her down there, I warned the vets. I said, no. And she was, I mean, she was hard to ride. She wasn't mean. Well, she could be.
But she was she'd look right at you,
Yeah.
you on the building.
And so when I got her down there, I said, this mare is very possessive of the foal. You really need to watch out when you're dealing with her. And when I first got there, they just took the foal to surgery, so I put her in the stall. Then he was there probably a week, maybe not quite.
Yeah, well, they told you.
Yeah,
we
I
handled
said,
all
watch
the
out for this mare. I mean, you really need to watch out for her. They, oh, we handle mares all the time. She's all right. Well, when I went down to pick her up, one of them met me in the hallway and handed me her halter. He says, you can go and get her. And when I went there, there's this big sign on the door that says, mean mare,
The whole
stay
section.
out. That was so funny. And she knew me. I didn't know I could put the halter and bring her out, but they really must have found out. You don't fool with her babies.
Oh.
Even if she had the foal and the vet was examining it, you hold her back away from it, she'd be kicking the wall. She'd stand there, wham, wham, laying her back a bit. Her mother was fabulous too, Orchid Fanny Ellen. They were so similar in a lot of ways. Belinda had a little more, Fanny Ellen was more the older type Morgan, and Belinda had a little more class. But she was by Dieberry Billy, and the Dieberries aren't, her. We bought him as a little weanling from Fritz Eisenhard. And he was really Dick's horse in the beginning. But I think Dick kind of liked the go and the Mohawk line, and so he ended up my horse. And we stood him at stud, we loved him, we showed him. You know who could ride that horse and make him look like a Cornwallis? Was Gil Carr. He had this long whip, and it was as long as a fishing pole. He didn't hit him hard. He just got him around the fetlock with it. Don thought he was God. He just really worked for him. And he won, I think he was reserve at the National Morgan Show in Northampton one year. He got a really good prize. And Gil had this way he could ride the horse, which he rode him well. But then he'd sit up there smiling as if this horse had gone so well that he's so proud of him. The judge would think, holy cats, that horse must have gone well. I don't know. He was a showman at heart, and Don really wasn't, but Gil could make him think he was. Don Morrow was a really pretty horse. He was a little long in the back. He had a head and neck that would just rock your socks, nice legs, but he was so lazy. And we were used to Mohawk. You know, Mohawk was in the bridle all the time. Where do you want to go? And Don, you had to whack him. And but Don, all his foals were pretty. They all had that lovely head, lovely neck. I loved Don, but not the way. In fact, I remember one day we were having some financial problems, and I said, well, I think I'm going to sell Don. And my little son came running in from the living room, and he said, Mom, Don the horse or Don the boy? It was so pretty. Everybody wanted to read to Don. We had to truck a horse, I think it was for, what was that lady's name that lived
Wilbur.
in Miss Wilbur, up to be bred to Ben Don. And of course it was in the spring, and there were all these gorgeous foals out there, and we just fell in love with Flair. So I think we had the money saved for something else, but we always did. And there was Flair, and so we bought him and went back and got him when he was a weanling. Oh,
No, he was
when he was here, he was a yearling, and he had a stall. We don't know if he was playing with the horse around the corner, biting, you know, they do it with each other, or if he caught his jaw under the chain that held his door shut. There wasn't any flesh on the chain that we could see, but he must have sat back and twisted his lower jaw. Well, we took him to Cornell, and they loved him down there.
Took 8
And
hours
they,
to wire him up.
yeah, they rewired that lower jaw.
But it never came back right.
No, so we didn't show him a lot.
Yep.
We had him till he died too. And he was the kindest stallion, just plain sweet about everything. And sensitive. I mean, we could ride him with a bridle, but we didn't want to push him.
I used to ride him bareback all over too, and he broke his jaw when he was a little tiny baby, and they wired him back together, and he didn't have any bottom teeth, so, and he did. He was really mouthy, but he couldn't get a good grip on it because he didn't have any bottom teeth, which was kind of handy. But we could ride him bareback everywhere too, and he was a lot steadier than Mohawk was. But, and he would jump, and he'd buck so high, they were so spectacular to watch, but he would just gently lift you up in the air and set you back down again. He was never going to lose you. He just wanted to show off, I guess. He was a nice horse too.
All the kids rode her. Don showed her and jumped her, and when he was showing and the kids. Cindy says she's the fastest Morgan she ever rode, and she was only 14 too. And she's Aaron's mother, and he was 16 hand. But she was really special.
She was my mare's daughter, Don Linda Morrow by Mohawk. And she was not the most beautiful thing in the world, but she was the first one I ever broke myself. I was 12 years old. And she was the kindest, sweetest, the smartest, just easy to get along with mare I think I ever. She might be my favorite. You know what? I got to scratch Kingsman and put Molly as my favorite. So unassuming. She was just so modest, it seemed, about everything that you'd forget about her until you say. We all showed her. I showed her, and my brother showed her, and my sister showed her. And she'd jump, and she was great on trails. I think we showed her park. I know we showed her pleasure. I took her to a dressage show with all those big fancy horses, and I remember one of the comments on the extended trot, the judge wrote "nice extension," underlined it, and put some exclamation marks. There was nothing spectacular about her you'd ever pick out, but she probably was the most dependable little lady on the face of the earth.
Then we had Aaron Allen, and we had Meadowbrook Dancer, his sire. Dancer was afraid of everything. You could take him on a trail ride and he'd see something up there. It'd take you 10 minutes to get to it. Coax and wait and coax and wait. Then you get by that, but then there'd be something else. I mean, one time I was riding him in a field, and there was a culvert in the field, and he was shying at one side of the culvert so much he fell off the other side. It wasn't deep, but he just was not a really fun horse. But I took him to the American Dressage Institute and rode him there, and they loved him there. And he was funny there. It was like being away at school. There were no mares there that he felt possessive about, and there were, not things that he was only working in indoor arenas or the outdoor arena where there was nothing to be afraid of. So everybody loved him there, but his real personality wasn't that great. He was by Hudson and went back to the saddlebred line, American-born, Admiral Denmark, American-born, and we bred him to Molly Allen, this line that we've had forever. And then Aaron was born, and Aaron was 30 days overdue. She carried him a year and 10 days. And when he was born, I remember an old horseman looked in the stall and he says, well, if he grows into that head, he's going to be a big horse. And he had a really pretty head, and he did. He was over 16 hands. And he was my buddy for 27 years. I was sitting in the stall when he was born. I was with him when he died. And he was my best friend.
Okay.
I had Aaron Allen was at third level, and all the other horses entered in that year were training in first level. So they didn't want to change the ring for one horse. So I actually rode a third level test in the small arena. And I remember how listening he was, I mean, Mom, what on earth are you asking so soon, all these things? But he was giving his heart that day. I don't remember how I scored it. I think she might have been a little generous because I was doing it under those circumstances, but he was a special horse. And then another time, it was at the championship. It wasn't a dressage class, but it was the championship for the New York State Horse Council class. And it was packed, and Aaron won that. And I remember once they shied a little at a sunspot, and then they asked for the canter, and I noticed the judge asked for the walk before the next sunspot. I'd have been around to that again. I thought, he must be watching me, because I don't know if that meant anything or not, but it was fun. Our daughters won the bareback equitation class at the Syracuse Breeders' Show every year, for like 4 years in a row. Nobody'd enter it. Could ride against those Stanton girls. In fact, I have a picture of Elaine getting a trophy bareback. So I remember one time she was probably 5 years old, and her pony was 3. She came in the house, she said to Dick, "Hey Dad, I think I got that pony broke." And Dick says, "Oh, why do you say that?" She said, "Well, he only threw me 3 times today."
When we were kids, my parents issued us each a pony when we were 6. And then they wouldn't let us ride with saddles because we'd be up over the hills, and they were afraid that we'd get hung up in a stirrup coming, anywhere and get dragged home and killed. So they just figured it was better to fall free and walk home, which I can certainly agree with. So we really learned how to stick riding bareback just to avoid the walk home for one thing. But when we could ride with saddles, which was always in the ring for the first, for quite a while, it was just so uncomfortable. And I guess I just continued to ride bareback till I was all through my teens. It was just my favorite way to go. I was always on something bareback, just twice as comfortable bareback.
He just had that look like, this is a great horse. Every horse he sat on, they loved him. He'd go in the barn, and he used to clean stalls. I mean, he helped us with all the work and the chores. And he'd go in the barn, there'd be a ripple in knickers up and down. "You gonna ride me? You gonna ride me?" And even when he's grooming, he had a whip in his back pocket. If anybody was offensive, he corrected it instantly. He was really a great trainer. The horses loved him and went well for him.
Yeah, that was no matter.
We bought her with a home improvement loan. We told them at the bank what we wanted it for, and they said, "Well, we don't have money for things like that. Why don't you just take a home improvement loan?" And so she had some nice foals for us, and then we sold her. Remember the very first Morgan show, Claire and I went, and we had so many coming, so we knew, and we vetted that many stalls that they were assigned to. And then there we were, sitting on the curb waiting for our first trailer to arrive. It was just sort of neat. I mean, it was so exciting. I think we had like 35 horses at the first show.
The first show, Dad, Mahoney, and I cleaned all the stalls, cleaned the barns.
Yeah.
Yeah, we couldn't afford it.
When we bought the farm, it was called Skylark Farm. And I thought, that's beautiful, but it's not a good prefix for a Morgan stallion. And we're going to probably raise some of them. So I used to truck horses for other people up the Massachusetts Turnpike, and you go under that sign, Tanglewood. Oh, what a beautiful, beautiful word. And so that's where it came from. Still, the Morgan horse has been the base of it all, I think. I went into Trakehner's for a while. I had 2 Trakehner stallions and a mare and a half Trakehner. And but I always came back to the Morgans. I had big Morgans anyway, and once I got Aaron, his offspring were pretty big. And we started pretty small. I mean, it was all we could do to afford this farm when we bought it. And we'd borrow money and build a barn and then work our tails off and pay it off. But we'd still have a waiting list for boarders, so we'd borrow money, build another barn, and that went on for too many times. And Dick says now we created a monster because we have 64 horses here, and they're all in box stalls except about 8. And they're cleaned every day. I mean, it's hard work. We're still at it, really hard. But then we got, in order to pay off some of these things, Dick was a horseshoer and he was on the road all the time. And I began to teach lessons so that, we can have more income besides the boarders. And so I could be home with the kids. And that's sort of how it went. We have quite a bit, we do quite a little in dressage now. I think that's been my line with the Morgans for the last,
Tell them what
even Mohawk. Pardon?
you university.
Yeah, we teach a credit course for Syracuse University. We've been doing that for 24 years.